Alright, so we've talked about frequency distributions for categorical variables. We can also talk about frequency distributions for quantitative variables or numerical variables. Uh, there's a little more setup, kind of what you have to think about when you do it for quantitative variables. So in categorical variables like the letter grade distribution that we just saw, we already have the predefined categories or bins or buckets, the things that we're going to count, right? The areas that we put in. For quantitative variables, we need to kind of think about how many non-overlapping bins or categories that we need, right? Then we determine the bin width and also determine the bin limits. So some of those are kind of iterative if you're doing it by hand. Luckily for us, the latest version of Excel 2016, provides us with a way to create what they call a histogram under the statistical charts. And so it does this for us. So we can do it, and then we can manipulate the number of bins or the bin width, that kind of stuff, which then determines the bin limits. So let's try this for quantitative variable. So for this, we'll look at a different data set again. So let's look at restaurant.xlx. So I'll download that from Blackboard under Materials Unit 2. Open it up. And let's see here. I got a restaurant, an ID number. Looks like we have, wow, more than I thought we had. 300 different restaurants, right? And we have the quality rating, which is a categorical variable. Meal price in dollars. I'm assuming that's US dollars. And the wait time in minutes after you give your name and before you get seated. So 5 minutes, 6 minutes, 1 minute, 74 minutes, right? So we have two quantitative variables, meal price and wait time. So let's try doing it on wait time, because no one likes to wait. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select that column, and then under, I'm going to go back up to the top so I can see this. Insert. Under charts, there's now the thing that looks like a column chart like we did before, but now it's all blue instead of different colors like this column chart here, which is the one we used last time. So insert statistics chart. So we want a histogram. Shows the distribution of data grouped into bins, which is exactly what we want to do. So if we do that, we come over and we see, let's make it a little bit bigger. Right, it gives us from 0 to 6.7, looks like there's 92 restaurants that are between those. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. So by default, this one did 15 bins for us. And so we have stuff that's in fractions. Maybe that's not exactly what we want. So let's do wait time distribution for the title. I'm going to come in here. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of the grid lines. And then if I click down on the axis, the horizontal axis, and right click and do format axis. So here it says automatic, right? So if I wanted to do a certain number of bins, so let's say maybe I wanted to do 10 bins, right? And so I changed this to a 10, tab off of that, and we see that now it gives the bin width of 9.4, so it automatically calculates the bin width for us, right? Maybe that's not what we want. Maybe instead we want to have a constant bin width of every 10 minutes, right? So if we do that, then it's 0 to 10, 10 to 20, etc. Right? We could also, so what happens if I change the bin width to something even more narrow. Let's do every 5 minutes and see what that does. Notice now we start to see different types of patterns. So as we do these frequency charts, sometimes it's important to kind of look at different bin widths or different number of bins in order to figure out if there's certain stuff going on. So we see between 0 and 5 quite common. 5 and 10 not nearly as common, right? But between 10 and 15 back to being pretty common. So there's a dip in there. If we had kept the bin width at 10 minutes, that gets hidden from us. So we can't see that. It doesn't come out. If we do a bin width of every 2 minutes, then we get lots and lots of bins, right? And we can see more of the shape. But does that add much value? Probably not that much in this case, but at 5 minutes, that kind of does, right? So we know that the majority, after about 15 minutes, it starts to drop off in the number of restaurants. But between 5 and 10, it's less than the 10 to 15. So that might make us think about, well, why is that happening? And does it have something to do with the quality rating of the restaurant? Things like that. So by right-clicking on the x-axis, you can change the bin width, number of bins, and all that stuff, right? And again, I would probably make it nice and pretty, which it's not going to let me do. That's fine. So that does frequency charts for wait time. So we can do the same thing for meal price, right? So if I select meal price and then go to insert histogram, and again by default it came up with what it thought was an appropriate number of bins, and you can read the help page to see how it does that. I'm not going to get into that. Again, I'm going to get rid of grid lines. This is meal price, right? Meal price frequency. Or distribution, whatever we want to call it. Distribution. Let's be consistent with the one above it. All right, so here it looks like it's going 14.9 for the bin width and have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So this looks kind of, it's still up here, right? This was right skewed quite a bit, right? A long tail out to the right. This also looks like it's right skewed, but not nearly as bad for the meal price. So again, we could modify the axis. Maybe we want it in nice even number of $5, right? Doesn't really change a tremendous amount from that. Maybe we want a certain number of bins where we have 10 different bins, right? Things along those lines. $5 increments in, so we did $5 increments here, right, for meal price. Maybe that's okay. Notice that it starts at 10. Nothing is cheaper than 10. What happens if we do $10, right? Much more, right? Kind of just, it's still showing us skewed, so it's still doing that. But probably 5 is about right. And it came up with, by default, 4.9. So sometimes we want nice even numbers down here so we can see what it looks like. Right. So again, that gives us two different ways. It gives us a way to look at a numerical value in a frequency distribution, or what Excel calls a histogram. And then we can adjust the buckets and bins, right, by right-clicking on the axis. So again, the idea behind doing this is to give us an idea of the shape of the distribution to see if we notice anything interesting. So next time we'll get into some more plots.